Hello, John Terrell here. Pull up a chair to the fireside at Chateau Cube, where we discuss life, limited magic, and cube draft. First, the super exciting news. A cube designed by me and a cube designed by our guest will be featured on MTGO in late May 2020. Today, he and I are going to give you the skinny on these very different environments. My guest is Gwen Dekker, who is the founder and lead developer of Cube Cobra, an open-source web platform that has fast become the premier cube management site. Gwen and I are both organizers of CubeCon, a competitive event featuring 10 unique cubes that will take place in Madison, Wisconsin. COVID-19 mandates that we postpone the event, but we are committed to making it happen when it is safe to do so. The event is spearheaded by Jonathan Brostoff, and our team includes Zach Hill, Brian Kowal, and Zach Halpern. 2 of the CubeCon cubes have been selected to appear on MTGO, one by me and one by Gwen. We designed these to be sister environments, legacy cubes that are not restricted by theme, by colors, by rarity, or by location. They are recognizably legacy cubes, and they share about 50% of their cards. However, we push these environments in totally different directions as a way of showcasing the diversity of gameplay experience that Cube can offer, even when one holds constant many environmental variables. So I am delighted to welcome Gwen Dekker to Chateau Cube. So our guest today is Gwen Dekker. Thanks so much for being here, Gwen.
It's great to be here today.
Our big exciting news is that Gwen and I each have cubes that we've designed that are going to go live towards the end of May on MTGO. I thought today Gwen and I could describe our cube environments and the philosophy that animates them. Why don't I turn it over to you, Gwen?
So my cube is dubbed the Dekkaru Cube, and the basic idea is I wanted to create a good draft experience primarily, but also have the gameplay be both varied and competitive. I found that with a lot of legacy and vintage power level cubes, you run into a lot of problems where different strategies are just wildly unbalanced, or you have some environments where you have what I like to refer to as the archetype focus. So some cubes have very high archetype focus, and you need to draft towards an archetype. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have cubes that are all just kind of good stuff cards. You don't have as tight and niche interactions like an Aristocrats or a Graveyard Matters, or even like a Reanimator deck is an example of one of these archetypes. And I wanted to create a cube that's kind of somewhere in the middle. So there are archetypes, but there are also just a lot of generic cards that are just powerful and good in their own right. And so when drafters approach the environment, there's a lot of options for them. If they don't really know what's going on and kind of want to do something safe, they can do that. But if they see a card that belongs to a strategy that they find is interesting or has a rewarding payoff, if they're able to follow through with it, they can do that. And that's been the primary style that I've been using to balance my cube.
That's awesome. So I've tried to push the Cultic Cube away from narrow archetypes almost entirely. So I want to support, in an extremely robust way, the major pillars of Magic, the major macro archetypes, those being aggro, mid-range, control, and combo to a much lesser degree. Some of these archetypes that Gwen was mentioning, like Aristocrats or the Graveyard Matters themes, these essentially don't exist in this cube environment. Rather, one is going to devote oneself to some version of one of these macro archetypes for which there is quite reliable support. So I go deep on effects that each of these macro archetypes wants, that each color wants. There is a huge stable of burn, of direct damage spells in red, for instance, much deeper than in the average cube. Blue has tons of cantrips, which allow blue to, in fact, reduce its land count and to cycle its way through the deck very quickly and find the components that it wants. I have support for some more narrow archetypes and some combo, notably Reanimator and other forms of creature cheat. So these are narrower archetypes for sure. I still wanted to support some of these because it's Cube, gosh darn it, and people love doing cheaty things. I want to support cheaty things. Heck, I love doing cheaty things as well. The issue for me that I confronted in designing this particular environment is that the cheatiest cheat is, of course, too powerful for many other strategies to compete with effectively, especially if one has an especially good draw, right? If you can get a Grizzlebrand into play on turn 2 or something, even in a legacy environment, that is possible given the right tools like Entomb and Reanimate or Animate Dead and so on, then it's going to be extremely hard for the opponent to beat that, and it forecloses choice for the opponent. So while I have a lot of support for these cheatier strategies, I start support for these cheatier strategies at 4 mana and make them a little bit slower so that these other kinds of decks can compete. But getting your Grizzlebrand in on turn 4 is still an incredibly powerful thing to be doing, of course. These cubes are going to make a fine pair, like a really interesting comparison. I thought, Gwen, that we might do a sort of AMA and throw some questions at each other about our respective environments. Are you willing to field some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. I'd like to talk about some of these archetypes. You've got all kinds of archetypes, as you mentioned, and you have an article that will be going up on the mothership that charts a whole bunch of these. And you have lots of recombinatory support for these archetypes too, whereby you have done a fine job of finding components that can slot into different archetypes. So I was wondering what some of your favorite archetypes are and whether there are some that are easier to put together when one's sitting at the draft table than others. Are there any that are more successful than others?
My approach to archetypes in this cube is you have a section of the cube I have just designated as glue. And this is kind of the good stuff cards I was mentioning earlier. A card like Ponder. You'll play it in basically any blue deck. Something like Doomblade or Lightning Bolt. These cards are all cards I consider glue. They're very core cards to their color combinations. They don't push you in a specific direction. In terms of the actual archetype cards, how I've done this is I have a couple cards that I consider payoffs for that archetype. So in this Graveyard Matters archetype, I have Moran of Clan Neltoth.
That's a cool card.
Yeah, I mean, the card's great. Like, you'll play it, you'll immediately raise that a creature, and if you get the experience counters on it, then you're reanimating creature every turn. So Moran is a 4-mana creature, costs 2 black-green for a 3/4. It's a legendary creature. It reads, whenever a creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. And at the beginning of your end step, choose target creature in your graveyard. If that creature's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you control, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, return to your hand. So when I first read this card, I thought it was like, okay, I have to sacrifice a bunch of creatures, and then maybe I get a creature back into play. But actually, this creature reads, at the end of your turn, raise that a creature, which is a lot better than it looks. Because you're almost guaranteed value from this, unless they have an instant speed removal spell.
Yeah. In my modern cube, I ran her for a long time, and I just loved drafting a Jund deck that would have her and Sneak Attack and Recurring Nightmare, and I'd just be like killing my own stuff constantly for value, but then Marin's raising dead and bringing him right back constantly. Oh my goodness. And I'm getting my Shriek Maw returning every turn. Oh, it was glorious.
Yeah, I mean, the card's obviously very powerful, but what it does in Cube I think is interesting because it rewards you for having a lot of creatures in the graveyard. So if I have cards like Shriekmaw, I mean, it's a bit of a combo, if you will. Now you get a Doomblade every turn. Or even Pack Rat, you gotta get the creatures back you discard. Or if I have something like Stitcher's Supplier, I can put creatures in my graveyard, get them back with Moran. Or Carrion Feeder, just any sack outlet, really. All those cards I mentioned are kind of like supportive cards. They're not the payoffs, and they're not quite glue. They're kind of cards that can slot into many different strategies, but if you draft them with the payoff, then you can get a huge reward for doing so. So that's how I've structured my archetypes. I know I've seen some cubes structure them like I have 20 cards, and this 20 card section is going to be my support for this archetype. And all the cards thrown into that archetype are very catered towards that kind of deck. And it kind of feels like you're just shuffling a lot of constructed decks together. You're not designing a cube. So I think when you do this approach where you only have like 2 or 4 payoff cards for an archetype, you end up creating a more interesting draft experience where players don't have to commit to an archetype, and they don't have to feel like once they pick an archetype, they have to pick every card and kind of do this on rail strategy. And also, you can kind of merge archetypes in a way and do, a payoff from one archetype and a payoff from another, and kind of have this overlap. Some of the archetypes I have, for example, do have this overlap where it's pretty easy to do so. Golos is actually a card I want to shout out because I think it's an excellent representation of this design philosophy. It is very solid as just play it, get your value land or a fixing land, and it does a fine job. But it also works as a very powerful payoff if you want to play a 5-color deck. It's both an enabler and a payoff, and the payoff is very good. If you're able to activate that once a turn, like, you're going to lock up the game pretty quickly. Like, if you're in a pod that undervalues the power of fetch lands, then it's pretty easy to come together. Another one of my favorite archetypes is what I think is the pod toolbox deck. It's a base green deck that plays Birthing Pod and or Prime Speaker's Vanifar. Everybody's familiar with the pod deck. I think it's really interesting to kind of craft your glue creatures to create this pod chain and try to design your deck during the draft to cover all your bases and to have an answer for everything. So Fauna Shaman and Court of Calling, I kind of consider to belong to the same strategy of deck, or kind of strategy in general. These are like your engines, and what you want to fill the rest of your deck with is these more generic cards that you can slot into any decks, and you have a much bigger pool to pick from.
Yeah, those toolbox decks are super fun for sure. And it is key that we got Prime Speaker Vanifar recently as another copy of Pod, because just having one Birthing Pod in a cube and even in one's deck made that archetype feel too chancy to me.
It's made me feel a lot more comfortable including this kind of strategy in the cube. If it was just a single pod, I feel like that could be really anemic, especially if you don't have a way to tutor for the pod reliably. And my cube is kind of light on tutor effects.
But that makes sense, I think, because of the power level that we're shooting for. I mean, I too am not running some of the most broken tutoring effects or many tutoring effects at all. Would you say that it is a more successful strategy in general when one's sitting down and drafting your cube to start with the payoff cards that you're describing, like your Marin of Clan Neltoth or whatever, and your Golos? Or payoff cards that aren't gold cards, maybe. But anyway, does it make more sense to pick up the payoff card first, or do you prefer to kind of coast along picking up Ponders and Lightning Bolts until you find your way into colors, or you're feeling your way into an archetype and you feel like you're kind of funneling down towards something that's a little more focused?
I think you can go both ways. I've definitely seen a lot of people that open up some payoff for an archetype that they really like, and they just go all in. But I'm the kind of person who will first pick an Into the Royal, which I may get a lot of criticism for, but I think it's just a fine card to keep yourself open. Like, you can put that anywhere. It's always going to be good. It's always going to make your main deck. And also, it's monocolor, and it's also blue. So, like, you're setting yourself up for success. Starting with, like, a pick one, pack one, generic good red card. Well, you're probably trying to do mono red or something if that's what you're doing. But it's not nearly as strong as picking up like a solid piece of blue glue.
I'm happy to pick up a mono blue card all day long. What are your feelings about picking up a gold card early? Just to say, I'm generally allergic to picking up most gold cards very early in a draft. This is something I've talked about elsewhere in a video. There are some gold cards that I'll do this for, but it's a very small subset of them. But depending on the environment, I can totally see why that might not be true, or why one might just have a different opinion on the matter.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. Like, looking through your list, I think probably the only gold card I pick one, pack one is Oko. And I'm probably not alone in that sentiment.
Yeah, that's a fine pack one, pick one.
Fractured Identity is also very high up there. Another one that is not in your list, but is in mine. And in my environment, I would also, is one of the very few gold cards I would pick on pack one, is Fallen Shinobi. That card is just an absolute powerhouse. I know some people don't run it because it's kind of like a feel bad, but I mean, I think the card is just good.
Yeah, that's the new ninjutsu guy from Modern Horizons. Could you read that card for those who might not know it?
Yeah, so he's a 5 mana 5/4 for 3 blue black, but you're not paying that cost. No.
Uh-huh.
What you're doing is you're paying its ninjutsu cost, and that is 2 blue and a black. And it reads, whenever Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost. The average case is you flip over a spell and a land every turn, and sometimes you just flip over a Jace and a Cruel Ultimatum or something ridiculous, and you just instantly win the game.
Yeah, I can see that being a powerful card for sure. Another difference between our environments, of course, is that you constrain planeswalker density to a greater degree than I do. And it seems to me that your planeswalkers are often tailored to specific purposes rather than being good stuff planeswalkers, just like general value walkers. So I wonder if you might talk a little bit about your thinking in how you approach planeswalkers here and also how you value them in the draft environment and whether they go up or down in value given their relative paucity and given their specific application.
I typically don't like a lot of planeswalkers in Cube. I think when you have too many, like a lot of the Moto Cubes, I feel like just have too many, and it makes for a less interesting draft and I think a less interesting play experience.
Okay, can you unpack that a little bit? What is less interesting about the planeswalker play experience?
I think typically planeswalkers are just so far above the curve than most other card types that when you have so many planeswalkers, you're kind of priced in to picking these walkers over cards that may create a more interesting gameplay experience. Like a lot of the time, the planeswalker play pattern is you play your planeswalker, you throw all your resources to defend it, and then the value engine just takes over the game over time. And I don't think that's very interesting in terms of creating a fun environment, and I don't think it's very interesting in terms of creating a competitive environment either. I do have 4 planeswalkers in red, but that's only because I have a very specific reason. And most colors only have 1 or 2.
Yeah, right. So, for instance, you're running red Duretti Scrap Savant, the 3 in a red version of Duretti, and he is a goblin welder effectively. I mean, he does other stuff as well, but he's like a more expensive second copy of welder is his big claim to fame, which is just to say that you don't put red Duretti in any random deck, but you put him in an artifact deck. He's got a very specific application. He's sort of a payoff card like you're describing.
Right, exactly. And that's actually Duretti plus Goblin Welder in my cube. That's a 2-card archetype package. That's all you need for that archetype. And then if you actually want to play it, then you figure out, well, if I'm playing these cards, I probably want some artifact mana so I can play Duretti earlier, so I can have something to sacrifice. Then you want to look at these big artifact payoffs like Mindslaver is traditionally a good one. Also have Godpharaoh's Gift, which you don't see as much of, but if you can cheat that out early, and be able to put creatures in the bin, it becomes pretty overwhelming.
And Duretti makes sense for that because he's able to bin cards as well, besides doing the welder.
Yeah, exactly. He's both an enabler and a payoff card all in one. So it's ways I can create this archetype and have a new strategy into the cube without taking a lot of card slots. That's why I like it so much.
What are other payoffs for welder for you in the cube?
So there's Ancient Stone Idol, which is a giant big dumb idiot who, when he dies, creates another big dumb idiot. There's Thundering Titan, which is, I mean, that's just good magic right there.
Yeah.
Mirror Battlesphere, which is, again, just a very, very powerful artifact creature.
Yeah, that's great. You've got this token strategy going that's super cool. I love that as well.
Yeah, the thing about tokens specifically is there's a lot of ways you can play the archetype. You can play it as like an aggro archetype where your curve tops out at the anthems, but you could also play it as like a mid-rangey or even like control archetype where game plan is to go up the board, then end the turn, cast a giant Secure the Wastes, and then you just swing for lethal. And that's another direction you can go with it. And also, it pairs really well nicely with some of the other archetypes. Like if you, so the red token cards work with a lot of the black sacrifice outlets. And so there's a lot of overlap there.
You don't have many utility lands in the cube. I noticed a few. There's like Mishra's Factory, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, Kasig Wolfrun. That's cool tech from that Innistrad era as well, of course. I wonder if you could say a few words about how you conceive of utility lands here, why you chose these few specific ones that you settled on.
I think a lot of other people just like these lands a lot more than I do. I don't think there's a lot you can do with these slots that adds a lot to your format. So the ones that I do have in my cube, I have in for a pretty specific reason. Nykthos is not seen a lot, but I specifically want a monocolor payoff to exist in the cube, so I have that in there. Kasig Wolfrun is also one of these cards that it exists because I want this red-green Stompy deck to actually exist. And it's interesting because you don't want to play this card in a 3-color deck because then you're playing a land that taps for colorless. So it really slots into like this one specific guild. So I really think of it more as a Gruul card, not like a utility land.
That makes
sense. Just
sense.
happens to replace one of your lands.
You mentioned Nykthos and payoffs for monocolored strategies. That's really interesting. I saw don't you have Gary in here? Is that right?
I do, yep.
So you've got Grey Merchant of Asphodel. For those who don't remember, he's from Theros, although he was just reprinted, right, in New Theros. 3 black for a 2/4 creature. He's a zombie. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. So there's clearly a monocolor payoff, devotion to black payoff. How often did you find people drafting monocolored decks? How successful was this sort of strategy? What colors is one most likely to be monocolor in? I think I lost track of the grammar of that sentence somewhere.
I think monocolor decks are pretty rare overall. I think half the time you see one in a pod. So I don't devote a lot of slots to these strategies, but I do make sure that you got a little, treat, a little bonus, if you will, if you actually play a monocolor deck, because you have access to a couple cards you otherwise wouldn't have access to, like Grey Merchant Asphodel. In white, you have Benelish Marshal, which it's actually a monocolor. It reads white creatures you control get +1/+1, right?
Yeah, because he costs WWW to cast.
Yes.
For a 3/3, and he says he's a walking anthem. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. But as you say, if you've just cast his 3 white pips, then you're probably playing mono white.
It's pretty hard to play this card in anything other than mono white. So I consider this a mono white payoff kind of card. And I have a few sprinkled around.
Would you play Nykthos in a mono white deck?
Like if you're towards the mid-rangey side, yes. But most mono white decks, you don't really play anything more than 4 or 5. So There's no real point to it. But I mean, maybe you're playing a mono white deck and you really want to play Elish Norn, or you want to play Elspeth Sun's Champion. You have a lot of these control aspects as well. That's something you can do.
How about in green? I mean, this green seems like the most natural pairing for Nykthos, just because the whole point of it is to make a whole ton of mana. So do you see mono green ever?
Yeah, I think mono green is the most common pairing with Nykthos. And even then, you actually, a lot of the time, you'll see the big green deck paired with another color just for a splash. So I've seen like a green-blue deck where they're trying to cast a giant mass manipulation. Mass manipulation is actually a green-blue card, right? You're never going to cast it outside of green-blue. Mass manipulation is a sorcery for XX blue.
It's a hell of a casting cost.
Yeah, it's hard to cast, and it reads, gain control of X target creatures and or planeswalkers. And you don't really want to play this for any less than 8 mana. 10 mana, it starts getting real good. Like 10 plus mana, it just wins the game. And I think it actually, like the printing of this card makes the ramp deck a lot more viable, because you're not just ramping into some giant creature and hoping that it's good enough. You're actually interacting with your opponent by taking their stuff.
And I'm with you. I like mind control effects a lot. The fact that this is a sorcery that just says gain control of the thing, is quite powerful because it means they can't just disenchant the mind control, the control magic effect. Isn't this true of Agent of Treachery as well that I saw you run? That's kind of techie, but it's also a powerful card if you can get him in play. He costs 7, 5 blue for a 2/3 human rogue. When he enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. At the beginning of your end step, there's some other text that doesn't matter.
Oh, it is relevant every now and then.
It is? Okay.
In my environment, you see it come up every now and then, yeah.
At the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents that you don't own, draw 3 cards. Okay, that comes up, huh? That's amazing.
Well, so like Blink is not really a supported thing, but there are like 4 cards that do work if you want to rebuy these ETB effects. Like I run Ephemerate just because this card is so ridiculously efficient. If you haven't used your Ephemerate and you have an Agent of Treachery out, there you go. You're triggering its second ability. I also have in Azorius, I have Soul Herder. If you play Agent Treachery into Mass Manipulation, you're getting the trigger. So you definitely can do it, but you have to work for it.
You know, we're talking a lot about these sweet, sweet things that you can do that require getting to the late game and spending a lot of mana. How would you describe the speed of the format?
Pretty average for a legacy-ish kind of power level. If you're against an aggro deck, the game will end in 4 turns. But if you are prepared for it, then you can get to the late game if you have the right tools. And it really depends. You can go both ways. Like, I think my cube runs a lot more 1-drops than most people are prepared for. Yeah, so I have these aggro decks in red, white, and black. Blue and green don't really get aggressive 1-drops. Green has Mana Dorks and Hexdrinker. And Hexdrinker is interesting because I was actually going to ask this. You had the same pattern I do. Is in your green 1-drops, it's all Mana Dorks and Hexdrinker.
Yeah.
No other color has just only one 1-drop aggro card.
This is another new offering from Modern Horizons 1. And my gosh, that set was such a good set for we cube designers. So Hexdrinker, he costs just green for this snake, who's a 2/1, and he levels up. He costs 1 generic mana to level up. Once you hit level 3, he becomes a 4/4 with protection from instants. Once you level him up to 8, he becomes a 6/6 with protection from everything. I'm totally with you, Gwen. I don't support green aggro. I think green aggro, as people traditionally conceive of it, I'm thinking of people who play like Experiment 1 or Pelt Collector into Strangleroot Geist. You know, this model of green aggro where you are trying to beat down.
That's exactly what I think of when I hear green aggro. It is exactly those cards.
Yeah, right. That hasn't been successful in my experience, mainly because we don't have enough of those cards yet. Pelt Collector was a help. I mean, I guess Hexdrinker is a help too, but I still don't think it's there. I also don't think it needs to be there because you can build an aggressive green deck, at least in my environment, you can. It works a little bit differently than a more traditional aggro deck because you still want dorks and you want to leverage green's acceleration. So you want to play an elf into a sticky 3-drop, into a sticky 4-drop. So you want bigger creatures that are harder to kill, that have hexproof for regeneration or whatever, some big dumb trolls that can regenerate or something, and just start smashing face with more powerful stuff a little bit faster. So this model of green aggro is a little bit slower. I mean, it's definitely slower than like a red deck wins deck, but then it has the advantage of being able to survive better through wraths and deal with opposing interaction. But circling back to Hexdrinker and where he fits into this schema, he doesn't really. Hexdrinker is a card that I run because he's just insanely good value, and he's a threat that the opponent has to deal with quite quickly because their options become progressively more limited for dealing with the guy. Once he gets pro instance, which only requires an additional 3 mana investment, then he is a 4 mana 4/4 with protection from instance at that point that you've gotten to pay for in this installment plan. And pro instance cuts out a whole swath of answers to this guy, obviously. And then once he gets protection from everything, then you've got yourself a miniature progenitus, and this guy just puts away games single-handedly. Anyway, card's insanely good value. I love him. He can go in any green deck, really. He only needs that initial green mana pip investment. After that, you can put any color you'd like into him to level him up, so you can even splash this card.
I see him in two types of decks. The first is non-base green aggro deck. Like if I want to play a green-red aggro deck, or sorry, like a red-green, base red, splash green. And then I have access to a couple mid-rangey, efficient green creatures as well. Like maybe I want to play like a Lovestruck Beast. That works with all the other cheap cards I'm playing. And it's also just like a very efficient beater. So that there does exist like this red-green stompy deck, or even if I want to do like a black-green aggro deck, you can still do it. The cards you're pulling from green are a lot limited. It's really exactly Hexdrinker as a 1-drop, and then a couple other efficient green creatures. But then the other deck is this mono-green stompy deck, and this deck utilizes mana dorks to ramp just a little bit. And Hexdrinker slots really well into that archetype because it acts as, if you don't have a mana dork, fine, you can still play a really efficient threat. And also later in the game, he's a mana sink for these mana dorks that you have lying around. So he fills that hole really, really well.
We've started talking about both of our cubes together and some of the overlaps between them. Maybe now's a good opportunity to transition over to my AMA. You have any questions you want to hit me with, Gwen?
One card I thought was really interesting is Gadwick the Wizened. When I see this card, I don't have it in my cube, but I would see it slotting into one of these monocolor payoff cards because it's pretty hard to cast out of this color. But it actually does a lot of work if you're actually in mono blue exactly. Don't have to worry about casting it on time, and the passive is actually triggers on every spell you play.
I like this guy a lot. I think he's super cool. Firstly, I love X spells. So Gadwick is a card that you can cast on turn 3 if you're able to get the 3 blue to do it. And he makes a fine roadblock for the control deck to stop the beatdowns from aggro decks or soak up some of that damage. So there's that. But then later in the game, you cast him for whatever you'd like. And when Gadwick the Wizened enters the battlefield, you draw X cards. If you cast this guy for 6, then you draw 3 cards off of him. That's amazing. He's really quite good, I think. The ability to just dump excess mana and draw a bunch of cards is insane. Tapping stuff that's really cool. It is less relevant than it could be in my environment because I don't support blue tempo decks or your sort of classic blue-white tempo deck in any robust way, where a flagship card for the sort of thing I'm thinking about might be Geist of St. Traft. He's not in my environment. I don't expect blue decks to really be beating down. The 3 blue pips, that's a real cost. I haven't found that to be too onerous. I think because if I'm unlikely to be able to cast him easily, I'm not going to be running him. Like if I'm in a Esper deck or something, I'm probably not running the guy unless my fixing is really quite good. But in a blue-white or blue-black or blue-red control deck, he's probably going to be fine, provided that you're base blue. The control deck is very likely to be base blue, right? Or at least quite heavily blue. So yeah, I love that guy. I don't think I've ever in my life put him in a mono blue deck. But as you're saying, he would be even more reliable there. I don't even think of him as a mono blue card. I don't think he has to be.
That's interesting.
In the same way that, Cryptic Command is a card that we've played for years in Cube. It's a Cube classic. I'm not actually running it here. I think it's still a totally serviceable card. More than serviceable, I think it's a good card. But I don't love 4 mana counterspells, even one with a ton of different modes. I don't even love 3 mana counterspells. So 4 is really a little too rich for my blood.
Another thing that I was interested to hear from you about is your land choice. I noticed you have double fetches, which I've seen a couple times before. I haven't tried it myself. But so what is the idea behind that?
I am so happy that I got WOTC to sign off on this. I didn't know that this was going to be the case, but, we've been in communication with the MTGO people who have been awesome. I've been going back and forth with them about my article I've written for them. And so I told them when I sent the first version of this list into them that I've got double fetches. I break singleton for the fetch lands. I think it's awesome. Here's why I think it's awesome. But I totally understand if this seems too crazy for Cube on MTGO and you don't want to do that. I'll find some other cycle of dual lands and it'll be fine. And they said, no, that sounds really interesting. Go for it. So we're going for it. So I like double fetches a lot. I proselytize for them. This was an idea that's not original to me, as you intimate, I think, in saying you've seen it elsewhere. This was something I read about in an article by Jason Waddell of Riptide Lab, who is an early theorist of Cube. So he advocated for this idea of breaking singleton for the fetches. And I tried it out. I was a little reluctant at first, but I have never looked back. Advantages of it are many. The biggest thing is it allows people to play Magic, darn it. Magic has designedly got a lot of variance built into it, which is part of the reason that we love the game, of course. And you're going to flood out, you're going to get mana screwed, you're going to get color screwed. All of these things are things that are going to happen in games of Magic, and that's part of Magic. The fetch lands, they don't help you with mana screw or mana flood in a substantial way, really, but they do help you fix your colors at least. They make it somewhat more likely that you get to cast the spells that you have in hand, so they lead to fewer feel-bads. That's the big, big advantage. There are lots of other advantages to fetches, of course. Fetches do so much work. They feed the yard, and that has all sorts of benefits for things like your treasure cruises or whatever. It's giving you fodder for that. And if you want to do any land shenanigans, like some Crucible of Worlds kind of stuff, then you're filling the yard with these lands that you can replay and fetch again. That's awesome. They thin the deck. That's a tiny, tiny thing. More relevant than that, though, is that they shuffle the deck, which is awesome for brainstorms and that sort of stuff. I just love double fetches. I think that a worry people have with double fetches is people have the perception that they can encourage 5-color good stuff decks. Like if people's mana is good, then they can just jam whatever they want. Honestly, that's a real concern, and that's a totally fair concern to have with not only double fetches, but with good mana in general. When I sit down to draft a cube in the dark, a cube that I've never drafted before, one of the strategies that I'll very often use is to draft lands extremely highly, picking lands over almost everything else. And then when packs are coming back around to me, I just take the best of what remains on the wheel, and I'm taking these 8th through 15th pick cards. This sounds like I'm missing out on a lot of stuff, but the thing is, in Cube, it's Cube, darn it. 8th through 15th pick cards are insanely good cards still, or they should be. So then, at the end of the draft, I'll assemble some 4 or 5-color monstrosity with exceptional mana fixing, and I'll just play all the best cards. And this is often an extremely successful strategy. In my own design, I want to create environments that don't reward that kind of approach to drafting. So in this environment, I've really pushed hard on these major pillars of Magic gameplay and interaction, as I've been describing, so that one is rewarded not for doing the 5-color special, one is rewarded not for adhering to a relatively narrow parasitic archetype, but to finding their lane in the draft, finding a broad strategy that's open, finding the colors that are open, and moving in on that and constructing the best deck possible in that arena.
One of my favorite parts about fetch lands just in general in Cube is not just how well they fix your mana, but it's the dynamic they create during the draft. Your balance of traditionally in Legacy and Vintage Cubes, you see a lot of the time you have the 10 fetches, 10 duels, 10 shocklands. And the dynamic between these 30 cards is, I think, really interesting. Sometimes the value of fetch lands or the value of duels changes depending on what you have already drafted, and you can speculatively take like a off-color fetch land in case you see a half on color shockland or etc. I really like this idea because it creates for a more interesting draft experience, and that's one of my goals with my cube. Is I'm not just targeting the actual gameplay, but I want the draft to be just as interesting as well. Another thing that your cube has been able to do that mine hasn't, just due to the timing of everything, is you've run cards from Ikoria. What cards from Ikoria have you tested that you've enjoyed?
Ikoria has been very good. I'll put a period right there. We have had such an embarrassment of riches from WOTC lately, over the past year or so. that very good feels like just not quite up to snuff compared to Eldraine, for instance, in a spectacular way where I was testing like 40 cards or something insane from Eldraine. So it looks like I've got about 13 cards, of which 5 are the Tri-lands from Ikoria. So I've got 9 spells from Ikoria here. And so that's great. Like 2 or 3 years ago, adding 9 cards from a set, that would be crazy good. And there are some crazy good cards here. So I guess one that I really want to give a shout out to is Shark Typhoon. This card, it's an enchantment for 5 and a blue. I'm going to read the first line of text, but then you can promptly forget it. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Now, it also has cycling for X, 1 and a blue. When you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So look, this card is effectively, well, it's an X spell like we were talking about with Gadwick. It slots into the curve wherever you'd like. It replaces itself. It's an instant. It's uncounterable because you can't counter cycling, at least with traditional counter magic. And the rate is totally fine for this evasive creature. So it's pretty comparable to something like we also got in Modern Horizons Cloud Conceer for the 2 and a blue 2/1 with flying that replaces himself, draws a card. Shark Typhoon, very similar. For the same mana cost, you get a 1/1 with flying that replaces itself. But unlike Cloud Conceer, he scales up. So you dump whatever mana you want into him and you get this bigger creature at instant speed, for goodness sake. So this card is insane. If you haven't tried this card, try this card. Trust me. Ignore that it says enchantment, whatever. Never cast it for 6 mana.
I kind of have to disagree with that part.
Really?
I think, yes, its primary mode is the cycling, but I don't think you can completely ignore it because you can actually, it's a modal card and you can treat it as such. Like maybe you only want to cast hard cast mode 10% of the time, but that is a control win condition. Like if you resolve that, you win the game. And its primary mode being the cycling of getting value, making a flying creature. I mean, I would play that in a control deck on its own because it gives you something to spend your mana on if you didn't counter the spell. It gives you something to do, which is exactly what you want, but it's also a win condition. So yes, I think you should definitely look at the cycling ability more, but I don't think you can completely ignore the main mode because I think there are use cases for it. And when you can access both halves of this card, it becomes absolutely nuts.
Yeah, you're right. That's totally fair. I'm being hyperbolic. The card is a modal card, and it's more powerful by virtue of that flexibility. That's definitely true. The card is a better card for the fact that you can cast it in its main mode. I'll just say for me personally in my testing, we haven't been living with Ikoria for that long, so, who am I to say? But I personally have never cast it as an enchantment yet, but also you can hear how reluctant I am to cast it as an enchantment, so this could be user error by all means. Could be that I've been doing it wrong, and there have been cases when I would have been more correct to have done that. That's a cool card. What else? Voracious Great Shark is a card.
I was just looking at that card. Yes.
Yeah.
To put this in perspective on how much I might like this card, I am playing Draining Welk in my cube.
Oh yeah, the 6 mana counterspell.
And I've heard a lot of disrespect for Draining Welk.
It's 6 mana and it's a counterspell and it makes an XX. Oh no, it doesn't make an XX because it is itself a creature. Sorry, you better just read the card because clearly I don't remember the card very well.
So it's 4 blue for a 1/1 flying flash. Then when it enters the battlefield, counter target spell, then put X +1/+1 counters on Draining Welk, where X is the CMC of that spell. So if you're playing on curve, ideally you want to counter their 6-drop spell. You're paying 6 mana, countering their spell, excellent. Then you have a 7/7 flying. That's pretty good. That's a lot of value. Like I said earlier, I've had a lot of people disrespect this card. I've also gotten so many people with this card and got so many times with this card that this card has earned respect from me. And that's why it's in my cube. So Voracious Great Shark does seem better in a way.
Yeah. So Voracious Great Shark, he's 3 blue for a 5/4 shark. He's got flash, and when he enters the battlefield, counter target artifact or creature spell. So he's a 5 mana counterspell who comes attached to this 5/4 body. He can only counter artifacts or creatures, and that's nice. It's also, it could be better. In Cube, it's the non-creature spells that I'm more worried about on average. But he's a 5/4 flash guy. So if you get somebody with it, it's gravy. Even if you don't get somebody with the counter magic part, you can flash this in on their end step, and all of a sudden you've got this 5/4 guy out of nowhere, or you can ambush an attack in your defensive controlling deck. He's got a lot of utility in a lot of different spots, and he's not only one cheaper than Draining Whelk, but Draining Whelk you could flash in without getting the counter magic value off of him, but then you got a 1/1, and that's not
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of why I kind of like Voracious Great Shark more, is Draining Whelk, you were priced into countering a spell. Like, if you don't counter a spell, man, is that sad. And even if you counter, like, sometimes you need to counter the 2 or 3 drop spell, and then you're also kind of sad that you didn't get their 6 drop or whatever. Voracious Great Shark, the base case is better. Like, you just play a 5/4 flash and you have this idiot, but you can also counter the threat and also have your idiot.
The card does lots of cool things. We'll see if it sticks around. Also, just to say, I threw in this new cancel we got, Neutralize. It costs 1 blue. It just says counter target spell, but it's got cycling for 2 generic mana. That's super sweet. I'm glad that we got a cycling cancel.
I really like that card. I mean, I've been running Disallow for so long, and I've been told to cut that card so much, but I just think that it's solid. Like, as a 3 mana counter spell, it has a wider range than cancel, but it's still basically cancel, which is not great. But Neutralize, I think, has enough of an upside that I want to say it's better than Disallow.
I think it is, yeah. In this version of the cube, I'm not running Disallow. I have, let's see, in Aleasis, my main cube, I'm running Sinister, Sabotage, and Disallow. Oh, and I guess Supreme Will. You know, I love Miscalculation, so I'm so happy that we've got a 3 mana version of Miscal that doesn't just tax their mana, because Miscalculation's 1 and a blue, counter target spell unless its caster pays an additional 2 mana. So it's like a slightly worse mana leak, but then it has cycling 2 on it, which is amazing.
So, as a reminder, both of these cubes will be draftable on Magic Online. The to be decided date looks like it's going to be mid-May. We'll have the exact dates in the description of this podcast. And I'm really looking forward to drafting both my cube and John's cube as well.
Yes, me too. I am so excited about this. Gwen, our cubes are going to be on MTGO. That is insane. My mind is still reeling.
Oh, I mean, I'm ready to get flamed harder than I've ever gotten flamed in my life for some of my card selections.
Right.
So...
Yeah, I know. It's true. It's the internet. We're going to have people yelling at us, I'm sure. And that's fine. People are entitled to their opinions. I have opinions. But I hope it's an interesting comparison. I mean, I honestly think that it is. We sat down and we mapped out this plan early on, not in any great detail, whereby we said Gwen's going to do X and John's going to do Y exactly, but we mapped out a general philosophy for how we wanted to draw a bright line between our cubes and distinguish them in a way that was going to encourage unique play experiences for people. I haven't gotten to draft your cube yet, but from comparing the two, it looks to me like we've totally achieved that goal. And I got to say, I cannot wait until your cube is up on MTGO and I can have a crack at it. I'm really looking forward to it.
I mean, it's every cube designer's dream to have something like this happen. So it's definitely exciting.
It is. It's so exciting. These cubes will be among the 10 featured cubes at CubeCon in Madison, Wisconsin. People are going to have the opportunity to sit down and draft these in paper, too, at CubeCon, along with all sorts of other super awesome cubes. It's going to be a great time. That would have been happening at the end of May, over Memorial Day, but then, coronavirus happened. CubeCon is still happening, darn it. We just don't know when the world is going to be set right enough that we can pull that off, but I can't wait to sit down around the table and draft these things as well.
CubeCon is going to be, once it happens, it's going to be great. It's going to be a blast.
A last word about other resources to help you succeed in drafting these cubes. Gwen and I both have articles about our respective environments that will appear on the mothership. Also, I am developing a Cultic Cube video with tips and tricks for drafting and playing my cube. Expect that to come out shortly before the cube goes live on MTGO. I hope to see you on Moto.